بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to our third annual Fiqh of Zakat workshop. Alhamdulillah, we're very happy to have you all with us, those on site and those online. Sorry for the little bit of a late start. People are still coming in. Inshallah, we're expecting a full house, inshallah. Our workshop today, inshallah, will be divided in a few segments. We'll be starting off with a brief intro to Zakat, and then we'll move on into who Zakat is due on. And then our main section, which will take up the majority of the time, is how to calculate Zakat. In there, inshallah, we'll cover all the different types of wealths and how to do zakat, pay the zakat on them. We'll do some practice problems together just to make sure we're understanding all the concepts. And the last section, inshallah, will be about how and where to disperse zakat. So those are the main sections for today. The introduction to zakat, inshallah, will be carried out by Sheikh Adil Ahmed, who is the founder of Enlightened Path Institute, one of the partners with us on this program. So I will ask Sheikh Adil to please take over, inshallah, and then we'll come back and continue from our side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. All right, let me just get myself up and running, and inshallah, we will get started. That's good to see my old institute that I'm from. You guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, perfect. I'm just getting accustomed to mixing up Zoom with PowerPoint. Let me share my slides. Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So we're doing the introduction to Zakat, and alhamdulillah, and now is the time where we will be looking to pay Zakat and fulfill this commandment of Allah. So this is something which is a matter of honor for us. Honestly, when we look at fulfilling the commandments of Allah, it is an honor for us to fulfill these commandments. Now, going into Zakat, what is Zakat? That's the first question. What is Zakat? And we generally have a perception of what Zakat is. So we know already that, of the different pillars of Islam, Zakat is one of the pillars of Islam. So we know that much. That's straightforward. That's the first thing which will come to our mind. Buniya al-Islam ala khams. And then amongst these five is Zakat. The next thing which will immediately come to our mind is helping the poor and the needy. In what capacity do we help them? We know that Zakat is meant to support these people. And sometimes it escapes our mind who else is zakat meant to assist. So one very important aspect is to help the poor and the needy of this ummah. Now, what does Islam actually have to say about it? Yes, so the hadith is straightforward. This is an authentic hadith that Islam is built on 5 pillars. First is shahada, that there's no deity of worship but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is servant, his messenger. Establishing salat, payment of zakat, the point which we are particularly addressing today. Hajj and Sawmi Ramadan, pilgrimage, making Hajj and fasting in the month of Ramadan. There's a very important aspect of zakat, that it is purification of our wealth. This is something that we have to be clear about. That yes, it is meant to help the poor. It is meant to help other people as well. People who are, for some reason or other, they're kept away from their wealth. Their wealth is not accessible to them. But in hadith it is mentioned that zakat never mixes with any property. It never mixes with any property except that it destroys it. Meaning that when zakat is held back with property that is not meant to stay with, it is not discharged. So it becomes like that rotten fruit. It is meant to be taken away. It is meant to be removed from this body of pure wealth. And it is meant to be discharged and put elsewhere. It has its use. It has its use. This fruit which is rotting, for us the use is limited, but it can be used for fertilizer, it can be used for many other things, but it is not useful for me. So in the same way, zakat, the wealth that a person takes from the zakat that he takes out from the body of his wealth, it is not useful for him. For him, it must be removed. But for the people who it is being given to, for those, masarif, those places where it is allowed, where the people are eligible to use it, it is of benefit to them. So that was just, the thoughts which immediately come to our mind. Now, zakat, or the verb zakka yuzakki, in Arabic, it has several literal meanings. So the first and foremost is purification, tazkiyah. And this type of usage, it refers to the purification of something. Just like gold is purified. How is gold purified? It is heated to extreme temperatures, and those impurities which are found within the gold, they're burnt away. So you started off with some alloy or some impure gold, but after heating it and really bringing it up to a very high temperature, the impurities are removed from it, and what remains is that pure, that original gold, 24 karat gold, which is of extremely high value. So that is the first, that is one of the meanings. And then another literal meaning of the word zakat, or zakka yuzakki, means to increase. And it comes with this meaning of increasing and to become blessed. So a person, what he literally sees when he is discharging his zakat is that the quantity is decreasing. He sees that the quantity is decreasing, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam are telling him that this wealth is actually increasing. And not only is it increasing, it is becoming blessed. The quantity may seem smaller, but the benefits are increasing. And this is one of the topics that we touch upon when we look at the spiritual aspect of it. There's the legal aspect, which Mufti Taha is going to be talking about, how to calculate, how to pay it. But what is the spiritual aspect of it? How does it affect our lives? Barakah is given in this zakat. And then another meaning of this verb, zakka yuzakki, is to denote some sort of praise. And generally we hear this type of usage either in the Islamic courts or with organizations, Islamic organizations which are collecting money, whose authenticity has been established. So we'll say that its tazkiyah has been done. Tazkiyah of such and such witness has been done, that he's not a shady witness. We can trust his testimony. So these are the different meanings, the literal meanings of the word zakat or zakka yuzakki, which are found in the Arabic language. And we find all of these things included in the sense of zakat, which takes place, the commandments of Allah. Now, when we look at the technical definition, this is looking at the technical definition now. It is no longer just the literal definition. So zakat is, by it we mean tamlik, transfer of ownership. Tamliku malin makhsus, of specific wealth. Zakat is not the transfer of ownership of just any wealth. It is specific wealth, which inshallah, we will be discussing further on. Ila mustahiqihi, to someone who is eligible. So these are specific terms to an eligible person. And this also is a separate entire discussion. Not anyone can just receive zakat. A person who is eligible, who Sharia has deemed as eligible. So who Sharia deems as eligible might be different than our understanding of who is eligible. But this is a command of Allah, and this is where we have to understand that the eligible person is established by Allah and His Rasul, the eligible person for zakat. And it might be different than just general sadaqah. You want to give to a needy person on the street. You see some poor guy, homeless, no job, many kids to feed, any help, anything helps. You drop this person a couple of dollars, no problem, but it's not zakat. Zakat, we have to be very mindful that it goes to an eligible person. And the last part is ma'a shara'it, following certain conditions. So when we put all of this together, transfer of ownership of specific wealth to an eligible person following certain conditions, now we start getting into zakat. So just to break it down, when I talk about transfer of ownership being the first and foremost thing, is ownership being transferred, that's something to consider. Of specific wealth, what wealth is zakat given on, a separate discussion. To an eligible person, that is a separate discussion. And following certain conditions, that again is another discussion, inshallah, all of which we will be touching upon in the rest of the presentation. So history of zakat. Now historically, zakat was, the previous nations have been ordered to give zakat. Just like fasting, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So fasting was established for us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is stating that it was established for the nations before us also. Was it exactly the same? No, there were differences, but fasting was established for the nations before us. So in the same way, fasting, zakat has been established for Bani Israel. In Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that He had ordered Bani Israel all of these things, that not to worship anyone but Allah, and to be good to the parents and to the families and the orphans, and to the needy, and speak good to people. And this last part of the ayat, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ, and to establish salat and to give zakat. So this was established for them too. Previous nations were ordered to do it. And now as we come upon being this ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we understand that spending was always something which was praiseworthy, spending on the travelers, spending on the needy, spending on the orphans, spending on the guests. This was always something which was praiseworthy. So we find that even in the Arabs, before the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, before his prophethood, they would consider it something praiseworthy. They used to take pride that such and such person, he takes care of people. He is generous. This was considered praiseworthy. Finally, when after the Hijrah, 2 years, in the second year of the Hijrah, it became fard. It became an obligation on the Muslims. So they had to give. Now it was not an option anymore. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would send his collectors out, and they would go and they would assess how much zakat needed to be given, taking a look at the people's wealth, at their livestock, and so on. And then he would tell them how much zakat needed to be given. So my respected friends, the virtues of zakat, the virtues associated with zakat, and the punishments which are related to a person not giving zakat. There are many, many hadith, ayat of Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he mentions in the Quran that which you give in zakat, seeking Allah's pleasure, then those, they shall receive their wealth increased and multiplied. And honestly, like I started off, that this is an honor for us, that we are giving zakat happily, because we know it is a commandment of Allah. And a person, when he invests in something, I got a call from someone earlier this week. He was asking me about investing in Tesla. Okay, that's an entirely different discussion, but he's thinking that I'm going to put money, I'm going to give them money, but I'm expecting a return on it. So he puts his money in, he is feeling happy about it. He's feeling this joy because he sees that he expects that he has a return coming. He expects that I want to put in $1,000 today, and I should expect 2,000-3,000 or whatever it is down the line. So when we give zakat, we should have an even greater expectation that Allah is going to give us a great reward multiplied, which we're not seeing the exact amount in the here and now, but the reality is Allah is going to give it to us. And then, like we mentioned, this hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, that when zakat, the wealth of zakat is mixed with, it mixes with something, then it destroys. It'll never remain mixed, except it will destroy and it will rot it. A person might have more money, but he will see a lack of barakah. He will see his money as being spent on silly things, on driving, parking tickets and this and that. He will have a huge amount. This reminds me of one. I was spending time in Jamaat with one of the youth of our locality many years back, and he was involved in some wrong business. So he used to make about $1,000 on a weekly basis. So for a kid out of high school, that's pretty good money. That's like, almost $70,000-$80,000 after taxes. And when he spent 3 weeks with us in the path of Allah, then he saw that he had spent, his father had given him $500, and in 3 weeks he had spent $250. And he said, you know what? I have understood barakah. I have understood the barakah of halal wealth. That today I am spending, every week I would be running by $1,000. I would buy brand name shirts, I would buy brand name clothes, I would buy this and that, and I would burn $1,000 in a week. But now I am in the path of Allah, and $250 has not been spent over 3 weeks. This is barakah in wealth. And that's a much simpler aspect, a much simpler perspective, but this is the reality. And sometimes it's necessary for us to go back to these simpler aspects to get to these, to understand the more complex things, so that this reality, we remove this noise of the so-called realities of life, the demands, social demands, and we come back to the commandments of Allah, the promise of Allah, and we see what Allah has in store for us. So this is from amongst the benefits. And inshallah, there is a lot more to discuss on this topic, but these were a couple of the main points I wanted to bring to the attention of our listeners today. And inshallah, I will hand the floor back to Mufti Taha.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Adil. For those of you who don't know Sheikh Adil, he's actually my classmate. We both studied here together at Al-Ihsan, and he's actually one of my earlier teachers. He taught me some of the books in first, second year levels of Arabic. So we're happy to have him with us for this program, inshallah. So moving on, inshallah, we will get into some more of the technical aspects. Before that, just a couple of guidelines, information. There is coffee available on both sides if anyone likes. Lunch will be served a bit later on, around 12:30, inshallah. If anyone needs to use the restroom, those are upstairs. So you need to go, access is from outside, and the next door next to Unit 11. You go into there, and that's our upstairs facility. The restrooms and everything is available there for you. Starting off with, who is zakat fard on? Meaning, who must pay zakat? Right? We have always different types of people in different situations. Zakat is not a type of obligation that is meant to put people into any sort of difficulty. It is meant as a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As Sheikh Adil mentioned, it's a way for us to purify our wealth, and it brings the barakah and blessing into our wealth. So primarily, the first criteria to even be eligible for those who zakat may be fardan. It doesn't mean that whoever falls under this, it will be, but it could be. This is what we start off with. So first is an adult. Now, an adult, we know in Sharia, is considered someone who is baligh, usually around the age 14, 15 or higher. So anyone younger than that, if they have wealth, zakat will not be due on that. Now, that is according to the Hanafi fiqh, but we'll touch back on that afterwards. There isn't too much of a difference of opinion there, practically speaking. Secondly, zakat is only due on Muslims. Non-Muslims don't have to pay zakat. And lastly, someone who is sane, someone who is sane of mind. If anyone has any sort of mental disability, they may be excused from the obligation of zakat. The situations vary from person to person. So about the condition of being baligh for zakat to be due. So the other three imams all say that zakat is also due on the wealth of children. If they have that threshold of wealth, what we call nisab, what we will talk about inshallah, they say zakat is also due. Now the Hanafis, they say that no, zakat is not due on them because there's many ahadiths that mention that children are not liable for any obligations in Sharia. Right? So zakat is one of those. But what they say that as a precaution, it's better that if the children do have wealth, the parents or the guardians discharge zakat on behalf of the children. So that practically there's not much of a difference there. Now, moving into our main section, and we'll divide this into two sessions, inshallah. We'll have one and then we'll take a break. We'll come back for the rest of it. How do we calculate zakat? So the first thing to understand in there is what nisab is. Nisab is a very important concept in zakat. When we have to pay zakat. So nisab, as we'll see, is a minimum amount of wealth. Once you have that wealth, do you pay zakat right away or does it become obligatory afterwards? We'll look at that. And then we'll jump into all the different types of wealth one by one. The only ones we will not be covering in this workshop is zakat on livestock and zakat on agriculture. Right, because the vast majority of people it does not apply to. If there is someone who does need information on that, you are more than welcome to come to us afterwards, and we can help you out with that, inshallah ta'ala. Zakat is something that is paid once a year. It's paid once a year. And it becomes due 1 year after a person first has nisab. Now, nisab, as you're going to see up ahead, they're based off of silver and gold. In silver, it's about 612 grams. In gold, it's about 84 grams, and we'll look at that ahead. Once you have that nisab, then if you retain that nisab for 1 year, then once 1 year has passed, you will pay zakat on that. Okay, there's a bit more details of how that works. We'll look at that inshallah. So, looking at an example here. If a person in the Ramadan, they had $800. Okay, let's say before that, they do not have wealth. Now they got $800. The nisab is generally around $500. Okay, it varies from time to time. A person has $800, that means they have nisab now. Now, zakat is not due right away. Like we said, 1 year after that, that is when now they will have to pay their zakat. Fluctuations in the middle of the year, if your wealth goes up and down, they don't matter unless you lose all of your wealth. Okay, so even if during the year you fall below nisab, and then you go up, and then you come down, at the end of the year, if you have nisab, zakat will be due. Okay, the word that comes in hadith are hawla and hawd, the two ends of the year. That is what is looked at to have nisab for zakat to be due. Right, so in this example, this person had 800, they went up to 1,000, they went down to 600, they went up to like 1,500, and then they dropped down slowly until they got to 200. But they still had some wealth. Yes, they were below the nisab, but they still had some wealth. And then they went back up. When the year ended, they were now at 900. So now zakat will be due on the amount at the end of the year, the $900. Okay. The only case where this doesn't apply, like I said, is where someone loses all of their wealth. They go into debt throughout the year, and then they gain wealth back again. Then the situation is a little bit different. So looking at it here, this person also started with 800. They went up to 1,000. Let me just put this on, it'll be easier for you to see. They went up to 1,000. They went down, they went up, and then they dropped until around Jumad al-Ula, looks like. They went bankrupt. They had no more money. And they went into debt. They went into $300 of debt. So as soon as they hit zero over here, whatever happened before now doesn't matter anymore. Okay, they had wealth, they didn't have wealth, that is cancelled. Now they went below, no zakat due, they don't have nisab. Then they got some money back, they started getting some. Now over here, about looks like midway through Rajab, they hit the nisab again, if it was $500. At this point now, the first end of their year has started again. When they hit nisab now again. That means now no zakat is due this Ramadan. Next Rajab, when it comes, that will be 1 year will be completed. Then zakat will be due on that wealth. If again they maintain wealth throughout the year. If they happen to drop below zero again, then they will restart again once they hit nisab again. Okay, so that's the condition for the two ends of the year. You start with nisab, you end with nisab, and in the middle, you don't go into debt. If that happens, then once the year is completed, whatever amount you have at the end, you will pay zakat on. Okay, and then in following years, if that continues, you don't go into debt, you don't go bankrupt, you will pay zakat on the full amount of wealth next year. Right? So let's say for 5 years straight, a person always had some amount of money. The first year they had 1,000. At the end of the first year, they pay zakat on 1,000, on the full 1,000. Next year they had 2,000. They pay zakat on the full 2,000, and so on and so forth. It's not just on the increase; it's on the full amount. Okay. There is one difference of opinion in here with Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, and what they say is that Zakat is due as you gain wealth incrementally. Okay, so if today I have $500, zakat is due on that. Tomorrow if I have 600, zakat is due on that. And every time you increment wealth, zakat is due on that, meaning 1 year from then, right? So 1 year from today, March 26, 2023, I have to pay zakat on my, let's say 1,000. And let's say if tomorrow in this year, I get another 1,000, I have 2,000, March 27, 2023, I'll pay zakat on that increase, right? But as you can see, that becomes very difficult to manage, right? Especially to keep track of how much zakat is due every day of the year. If you're getting money, if you get paid every 2 weeks, every month, you have to keep track of all of that. So even all of the Shafi'i ulama scholars, they say that it's okay to discharge it once a year, right? Some of them who take the more cautious, the more strict route, they say do it once a month instead. So no one says do it every day or every week. That becomes too difficult to manage. But generally, like I said, even many of the Shafi'i scholars, they opine that you can do it once a year. That is okay, as long as you make sure you're doing your calculations, everything correctly. Because as we will see later on, it is permissible to pay zakat ahead or later than your exact date. Right? You don't have to discharge it right on the date when it becomes due on. So they follow that principle that you could gather it all and pay it, discharge it at one time. Right. If there are any questions throughout the program, if they are about the topic that we're actively discussing, then feel free to ask on the spot. Okay. If you have other questions, we have a session at the end for Q&A. Please keep those for that time. Most likely, all of your questions will be answered throughout the workshop. Right? We still haven't gotten into any details. There's a lot to get into still. Right? As you still have questions, you're more than free to ask at the end of the session when we have the Q&A portion. Yes.
So there are two ends there. Calculating that.
Yes.
The first end, I have to calculate that whether I had nisab or not.
Yes.
So during the time of calculating that I had nisab or not. So shall I deduct any expense or anything?
Yeah, we're going to cover all that. It's going to cover all the deductions. Yeah, there are. No. The first time doesn't matter.
Okay, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to discuss when we talk about silver and gold is that nisab is on your savings. Yeah, not on your active wealth that you're using every day for your expenses. That's what you have in excess of your like monthly expenditures. That's the wealth you look at. Right? So then in that case, your any deduction that you do have, any expenses, they won't apply to that anyways. That's why.
So the first end of the year, so I have to just see how much savings I have.
Yeah. And let's say, for example, right? Let's say, for example, I have someone gives me $10,000 today. Right? Let's say before that I had no money. Someone gives me $10,000, but my expenses are in excess of 10,000. Right? I have different bills, different things to pay. My beginning of nisab has not started. Yeah, you have to have in excess of the wealth for your expenditures. If you have that, that's what is considered for the ends of the nisab. Gold and silver. Gold and silver are the original types of wealth in Sharia. All other formats of wealth that have been adapted are because of necessity. But what Sharia actually considers wealth is gold and silver. In the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the coins that were used, dirhams and dinars, dirhams were silver coins and dinars were gold coins. So that's what everything was based off of, which is why when we look at the ahadith which mention the nisab, they are all mentioned in dirhams and dinars. But from there, ulama have taken the exact measures of those and how to transfer those into grams to make it easier for our use. So the nisab of gold is 87.48 grams. The nisab of silver is 612.36 grams. Many ulama take this measurement instead 595.35. And that is a more cautious route, right? I don't have much to say about the amounts. I'm going to explain to you how to use them. But just one note, this 595, right? So I'm going to say this again and again in different things. In zakat, it's always better to take the cautious route. If you're doing calculations, you're not sure of something, do I owe zakat on this or not? Well, the first thing would be to try to find out. Ask a scholar, ask someone. But if ever you're in doubt on the spot, you have to make a decision. always take the cautious route, because anything extra you pay, it'll just count as extra sadaqah that you're giving. But if you miss out on something, then you're going to be in the whole, you're going to be owing that amount still, right? So in this case, I've seen more and more ulama leaning towards 595.35 grams. Honestly, it's not that big of a difference. When you're doing, you're seeing if you have nisab, most likely this difference won't affect you, right? Unless you're looking at exactly how many cents it is, do you have nisab or not, most likely it won't apply to you. Okay. Now, the nisab of gold. Okay, so we use money, we use cash, right? When you're paying zakat on cash, on money, we use the nisab of silver. Okay. I didn't check today. I was going to check before the workshop because it changes every day. But let's say that generally the nisab of silver, it comes out to around, I think it's gone up. It'll be around $600 something. The last time I checked was a few months ago. The price of silver in Canada was 97 cents per gram. So this will be around $600. The nisab of gold, it comes out to around, I think, $4,000, $3,500, $4,000. The problem, not a problem, but the dilemma that ulama have been facing for a long time in zakat is that the nisab of silver is what has been agreed upon for centuries. That's what is used. But nowadays, a person who has $500-$600, they've met the nisab in savings, but by no means or measure will they be considered wealthy, right? If that's all the savings that they have. So should zakat be due on someone who only has that much? So some scholars have started using the nisab of gold instead for calculating zakat on money. Meaning if you have $3,000-$4,000, then zakat will be due. But our official stance is still to use the one of silver, because no major senior mufti of the world has officially given a fatwa yet to move over to the nisab of gold. The National Zakat Foundation, they are also still on silver. They're using the one of silver as well. So for that reason, we stay with silver. What some ulama do, again, this is a more cautious route, is that for the sake of giving zakat, use the nisab of silver, and for the one who you're giving it to, use the nisab of gold. And why that matters is because when you give someone your wealth of zakat, you cannot make them owner of nisab through what you're giving them. So let's say you have like $200,000-$300,000, and your zakat comes out to about, like, if you have 100,000, your zakat is to 2,500. Let's go with that. You can't give that all to one person, because as soon as you give them to the amount up to nisab, say 600, they can't get more zakat now, because zakat, that's the last chapter, but zakat, only those people can receive it who don't have nisab. Right? So you can't, if you're giving them more than the nisab, that excess that you're giving them, they're not eligible to receive. So what they say is then use the nisab of silver for yourself. Like, now it's due on me to give, but you're giving it to, especially if it's in cases where there are, like international causes, where there's people who have been orphaned or homeless and this different things. Consider that they are using the nisab of gold, so you can give them, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, and they won't have nisab from that standard, from that viewpoint. Right? So that is okay to follow, because for yourself, you're still taking the more cautious route. You're taking whatever leeway, leniency there is. You're using that for the benefit of the other people, not for your own benefit. So that is okay. Okay. Now, if you have no wealth except for gold, okay, you don't have cash saved up or anything, you only have gold, jewelry, or whatever, you will use the nisab of gold. Okay, that's the only place where right now everyone agrees on that you use the nisab of gold if you only have gold. You don't have anything else. If you have mixed wealths, you have gold, you have silver, you have cash, you have investments, you have this, you have that, then you combine everything and use the nisab of silver. Okay. For the online students, if anyone has a question, if you just put your hand up and I'll call on you, if you want to use your mic, or you can just type it in the chat. All right. Jazakallah. So if you have mixed amounts of wealth, use the nisab of silver. In jewelry, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah says that if the jewelry is being worn and used, meaning it's jewelry that you wear, zakat is not due on that. Okay, because zakat, the general rule is that zakat is not due on things of necessity, things of use. So they say that gold and silver falls under that. In the Hanafi school, they say that no, zakat is due on that because yes, although it may be for use, in essence, it is the original type of wealth in Sharia. It's gold and silver. So from that aspect, zakat is still due on that. Again, both sides have their proofs from hadith and all. But again, the cautious route is to pay zakat on that as well. When talking zakat on jewelry, if the jewelry of mixed alloys, okay, there's some, there could be many combinations, but let's look at something that is silver. Okay, if there is more silver in it than other metals, then zakat will be due on it. If the other metals are more, let's say it's majority of it's platinum and there's some silver coating or something on it, zakat won't be due on it. Okay. When it comes to gold and carats, so in carats, how the system of carats works, in case someone isn't familiar with it, is 24 carats is pure gold. 24 carats is pure gold. And then whatever number of carats you have, that's the ratio of it out of 24. So if you have 20 karat gold, you have 20 out of 24 parts of that is gold. The rest is something else. If you have 12 carats, that means half of it is gold, half is something else. Okay. So the same thing applies there. If you have less than 12 karat gold and the other metal is the majority of it, zakat won't be due on that. Okay. I'm saying if you have just like one piece of jewelry that you're looking for zakat on, zakat won't be due. Okay. If it is more than 12 carats, 12 or more, let's say, then zakat is due on the market value of that. So you can find that in a few ways. One is you go to a jeweler and ask them how much is this worth. You pay zakat on that amount. The other way is you weigh that jewelry and you see, knowing how many carats there is in there. Let's say it's 18 carats gold, right? You weigh it and then you pay, you value that jewelry at 18 out of 24 of that total value, right? Let's say, for example, let's say to make things simpler, 10 carats gold was 100% gold, okay? And 8 carats is 80% gold. So if you have, let's say someone has one big bangle of gold, they don't have any other wealth, okay? And it's 8 carats and 10 is the full carats in this example, to make it simpler. They're going to weigh that bangle. Okay, let's say it weighs 100 grams. They're going to now value that as though it weighed only 80 grams. Because 20 grams of it is something else. Right? Only 80 of those grams is actual gold because it's 8 out of 10 carats. Does that make sense? Is it getting too complicated? Right? So you see your jewelry you have, basically, how much of that is actually gold? You pay zakat on that amount. Right? Or the other simpler way is you get it valued by a jeweler. They're going to use a similar method because the value of it is based on how much gold is actually in there. Right? So both methods can work. Now, the reason why I kept saying is if that's all you don't have any other wealth, is because if you have jewelry that's less than 50% gold, for example, right? Let's say you have 20 bangles and each are 10 carats out of 24, right? So none of them are above 50%, but collectively you're now way above nisab. Right? So then it doesn't matter if it's less than 50 or it's more, you're going to pay zakat on that. So the only time when the 50% rule comes into play is when you have just that one piece of jewelry and you want to know, okay, do I have to pay zakat on this or not? Right? So generally, you will end up paying zakat on that jewelry. Okay. Okay. Seeing that many people have not showed up yet over here, if someone wants copies of the paper notes, you can feel free to take them from the back. Rich, you want them for use. Stones and gems are not zakatable. Zakatable is a term you're gonna hear a lot. Zakatable means zakat is due on it. Okay, stones and gems, diamonds, rubies, anything like that, zakat is not due on it. Platinum rings or any other metals, zakat is not due on it. It's only due on gold and silver. If you have a mixture now, like we said, of cash and jewelry and so on, you're now going to take the value of everything together and you're going to be above nisab most likely, and you'll pay zakat on 2.5% of that. Okay, that is how much you pay in zakat. And this is really, again, another mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the percentage is so small, right? Find me one country in the world where their tax rate is less than 2.5%, right? But there may be some that don't charge taxes, but they have other ways of getting their funds. But generally, where you have taxes, it'll start maybe 6, 7%, 8, 10. I grew up in Quebec. Tax rate was 15%. Right. So, and you will see in the examples that we do, right? Someone who has like tens of thousands of dollars, the zakat's going to be a few $100s, maybe even less. Right. So that's one of the main differences that come in when we look at zakat versus taxes. And zakat isn't actually a tax, it's an ibadah, it's a worship. Right? Okay, that brings us to our first practice problem. It's also in the notes for those of you who have them in front of you. Try to do this calculation. It's a simple one. Someone has these amounts of wealth. How much zakat do they have to pay? Okay, take a few minutes, do the calculations, see what number you come up with. Yeah. Abdullah, can you just give them to whoever wants them? And the pen as well, please. And those who are online, when you have your answer, feel free to put it into the chat. And if any other questions are coming to mind about things we've already covered so far, feel free to ask them. Remember, once you have calculated the total amount of wealth zakat is due on, it's 2.5% of that. Okay, we have some answers coming in. So this is what we're looking at. Everything in this list is zakatable. So all you have to do here is just add them up and calculate 2.5% for those. That is your amount of zakat, $148.75. Okay, as some students correctly submitted. Okay, any questions on how we got that number? All good? Okay, let's move on, inshallah. Deductibles. We're going to look at things you can deduct from your zakatable wealth, loans, debts, and then we'll come back to different types of assets. Okay, we'll look at stocks, investments, real estate, RSPs, RRSP, RESP, pensions, collectibles like NFTs, cryptocurrencies, all that will come after, inshallah. So, if you owe money, to someone, you can usually deduct that from your total zakatable wealth. Okay, let's say you have $10,000, you owe $2,000, you'll pay zakat on 8,000, not on 10,000. Okay, but it depends what the nature of that debt is. Okay, if the debt is being paid back in the next 12 months, whatever you're going to pay in those 12 months, that is the amount you can deduct. Okay. This could be a one-time repayment that you're doing in the next 12 months, or it could be installments of something you are paying back for a car, for a house, for something. Whatever you owe in the next 12 months, you can deduct that from your zakatable wealth. Okay. When it comes to installments, usually things that apply to people are like car financing, mortgages, student loans. Those are the three most common ones. There could be others as well. We're going to be talking about many different types of wealth today. We're not getting into what is halal, what is not halal in this workshop. Okay, I'm just going to tell you how to differentiate what to pay zakat on. So if it is an interest-based mortgage, you can only deduct the capital amount you are paying back over the next 12 months, not the full amount. Okay, any interest you're paying back, you cannot deduct that. Because when it comes to impermissible wealth and transactions, zakat doesn't apply to any of those. If you have $10 million, but all of it is impermissible wealth, no zakat is due on that. Okay. So in the case of a house or a car or student loans or something, if you're paying back the loan with interest, you can only deduct the capital amount. Okay. Now, when it comes to a car, if you are leasing the car, you can't deduct anything, because leasing is like renting. It's not a debt that you owe. It's a payment you're paying every month to use that car. If you have financed the car, then yes, you bought the car and now you're paying it off. You owe that, so that you can deduct the next 12 months of capital payments. If it's a 0% loan, then you can deduct the full amount, no problem. Okay. These are for things you're going to be paying back in the future, right? If you have other expenses, other debts due from the past that you haven't paid back yet, that are overdue, for example, you can also deduct those. Okay, so things that you were supposed to pay before, you haven't paid yet, that they're due right now. They're actively due every day. The person is expecting you to pay. You can deduct all of those from your zakat as well. Okay. Yes.
For example, now I have to pay zakat, but after 4 months, I have to pay my tuition fee. Or after 6 months, I have my son's married, I have to pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
Or after 4 months, I have an operation.
Yeah.
But I have to pay. How about this?
No, so if it's an expense that's coming up, you can't deduct that, right? Because the only case you could apply deductions, if something is already due on you at that time. You may be paying it off in the next year, but at the time of your zakat date, your zakat anniversary, it is due on you. Right? So in the example you gave of a wedding or some travel or some expense, those expenses are not due on you yet, right? So you can't deduct those from your zakat. And that was the next point here: future expenses and bills, right? Utility bills. utility bills, phone bills, anything like that. You could deduct what is due that month, because that month that is due on you. If anything is due in the future, you can't deduct that. Okay. And either way, even if, let's say your zakat date is on the 10th of the month and your utilities are, the bill's gonna come on the 15th, well, there's sort of the previous month's billing cycle that's applying to you right now. Okay, so if you haven't paid that yet, you could deduct that amount from your wealth for that month only, not any future months. And then we mentioned whatever is not payable in 12 months, whatever is beyond 12 months, you can't deduct that. And we mentioned any unlawful income that you have, zakat is not due on that, and you can't deduct that either. Okay. We'll talk about loans and then we'll take a break, inshallah. So loans are of two types. One is a weak debt, and one is a strong debt that we'll look at next. So a loan, basically when money is owed to you, that's what we're talking about. Okay, do you pay zakat on that? So if it's a weak debt, and what a weak debt basically means is that money is owed to you, but not because you gave someone money. Okay, it's not like you gave a loan and our money is owed back to you. But someone owes you money for some reason. It could be wages that you're owed from an employer. It could be inheritance that you're going to be receiving, right? It could be the dowry for a woman in the marriage that she's going to receive, that she is owed. So when you are owed money, but it's not because you gave money first that it's owed back to you, then zakat is not due on that. Okay, that's considered a weak debt. Once you get those funds, then you'll see when your zakat anniversary is, when the year ends. If you still have those amounts, you'll pay zakat on that amount at the end of the year. Okay, that's a weak debt. A strong debt, as you can probably guess, is when you gave money and now it's owed back to you. So when you give a loan, you are still the owner of that money. It's still your money. Someone else is using it for now. Zakat is due on that. Okay, but you have the option. You can either pay zakat at that time, even though you don't have the money. You don't have that money, but you have other money to pay the zakat with. You could include that in your zakat and pay it off. Let's say it was a very large loan and you don't have enough money to pay the zakat for that. You can wait until you get the loan back, but then you have to backdate and pay the zakat for whatever time has passed. Okay, so let's say you gave someone $2,000, and the time for zakat comes. If you have other cash that you can use to pay off the zakat for that 2,000, it's better to pay it, get it out of the way, right? But let's say you gave 200,000 and you don't have now enough money to pay the zakat that is due on that. You could wait until, let's say you get the loan back in 3 years. After those 3 years, you're going to backdate now, and you're going to pay zakat for each year on that 200,000. Okay, so it's all about whether you want to pay it every year or you want to wait and backdate it afterwards. Okay, one point that's down here: if you don't expect to get the money back, okay, let's say you gave a debt to a long time ago and they're just not paying you back and you've lost hope. I don't think I'm going to get it now, right? Then it's better that don't pay the zakat. Wait until if they ever pay you back, then backdate it and pay it. Because if they don't ever pay you back, then you won't be liable for that zakat. Okay. If you have lost money, similar thing. You lost the money and you don't expect to find it now. You don't know where it is, where it went. Don't pay zakat on it yet. If you ever find it, then backdate it and then pay zakat on those amounts. Okay. I think we have another practice problem here. I think we have two of them. Yeah. Okay, let's do one. We'll take a break and do the second, and then come back and do the second one. Okay, so here you have someone who has cash in their bank at home. They have gold, silver. They have a car finance. Okay, finance keyword. They have a loan that they've given to the masjid and they want to pay zakat on it now. They don't want to delay it afterwards. okay? And a loan that is owed to a friend, payable in the next 12 months. So keeping those things in mind, try to see if you could do the calculations for this, what amount of this wealth is zakatable, and how much does that zakat come out to. Okay, take a few minutes. We'll go over the answer and then we'll take a break, inshallah. Okay, we have one answered, 357.5. Okay, so let's take a look. So this comes to 275. So what did we do here? We see a plus, we added all those amounts. Okay, we added the cash in the bank at home, added the gold, added the silver, and we added the loan amount. We said we want to pay the zakat on that now, right? So adding all those up, we got this 15,600. Okay, what do we deduct? We deduct the car finance, but times 12. Okay, assuming this is the full capital amount. So that gave us $3,600 to deduct. And the loan that we owed our friend, we said is payable in the next 12 months. So we deduct that as well. Our total deductibles are $4,600. Once you have those, you subtract those from your total zakatable wealth. You're left with 11,000, and you pay zakat only on this 11,000, 2.5%. That gives you $275. Okay. Any questions on this? How we got that? We have some questions that have come in over here. Sorry, I missed these. Can we deduct our rent for the next 12 months? No, you cannot. Only rent of that month that is due, because it's a future expense. What about credit lines and credit cards? Same thing, only the capital amounts you could deduct that are owed back. We don't pay zakat for jewelry that I am using. Yes, you do. According to the Hanafi's fiqh, you do. Okay. Okay, I think we're about or just over an hour in. Good time for a break. We'll come back. I'll put the next one up. Someone wants to start working on it. We'll come back. Let's take about 15 minutes. 12:05, inshallah. We'll come back and we'll continue with the rest, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.